I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Welcome, hello, everybody, to today's episode. I have Melissa De Leon Mason on. She is known on Instagram as Quilt All the Things. She has presented and taught at QuiltCon and in guilds. She is a foundation paper piece design master. She just released a foundation paper piece online course that you can enroll in. Well, you can't now because the current class is closed. She limits enrollment so that she can be present and be there to answer questions and support her current students. So look for another opening in the class in a couple of months. She said she'll open enrollment periodically so that people can join the class sessions a few times a year. So that's exciting. So if you didn't get in this time, you can try again next time. Other than that, she's going to be at QuiltCon 2025 in Phoenix, teaching her foundation paper piecing course again. This time she's got a making component where you do the workshop for the first 3 hours, and then in the afternoon you get to actually make the foundation paper piece design that you create in her workshop. So that's so exciting. I'm excited to hear after all of that, like how it goes for her, because that's so fun. Anyway, besides all the other things she does, she's a counselor, she's a mom. Teaching and designs are what she is pretty much known for on the quilty Instagram sphere. So go check her out if you have not and take a listen to the episode. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great. Good to be here, Amanda. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for doing this. It's so exciting to get to talk to you because I've been obsessively following your foundation paper piecing and just your whole situation online. So this is really exciting to get to talk to
My
you.
situation. I like that. It sounds like that's like code for my whole mess of chaos, my situation.
I don't know if I would
Very
call it chaos,
accurate.
but yeah.
Oh, I would.
Well, okay. You said it, not me.
No, it's great to be here. I love watching your show and listening to it. So
Oh,
it's
thank you
kind of
so
nice to be
much.
here and actually like see you face to face or computer screen to computer screen.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's different when you're like, I, yeah, I'm always like chiming into other people's podcasts. I'm like, I wish I could be talking to that. Like,
Hmm.
if I feel like I could jump into the conversation, I love that. So
Yeah.
hopefully that's the vibe. But
Yeah.
well, yeah, this is so exciting. I've been um following you, like I said, and I've been so scared of foundation paper piecing for so long, and I finally started doing some. Um, and now I'm enrolled in your class, so we can talk about that in a little bit.
Awesome.
But first,
Yeah.
I want to know how you even got into quilting in the first place and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, it's a convoluted story. It begins in the streets of Egypt.
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah. It was 16 years ago, and I know that exactly because, well, 17. I guess it would be 17 because I was pregnant with my oldest child,
Mm.
and we had just kind of I had graduated. My husband had just gotten his doctorate, and so his first teaching job was a university in Egypt. He does American history, but like Egypt, right? Why not?
Yeah,
And
sure.
so we moved to Egypt. Like when we got the offer, we're like, yeah, we're young, we have no kids, why not? Let's do it, you know. And then we found out we were pregnant after we accepted the job. So
Oops.
so it was a different kind of adventure than we were expecting. But yeah, we were living in Egypt. It's an incredible place. So he's teaching, and so he'd go off to the university, and I'm not working. I don't have a work visa, and so I'm spending this time just like exploring.
Mm.
Because Cairo is just this incredible place where there's like layers on layers of like history and art and color. Like at first, if you've ever been to Cairo or seen pictures, like the color is like dust and sand, but underneath that, like once you kind of get to know it, so yeah, so I was exploring, and one day I found myself in like a quarter of the city that I hadn't been before. Maybe I was a little too adventurous in retrospect, but I'm like starting to feel a little unsafe. It's like there's just so creepy vibe. I felt like Cairo has these neighborhoods, right, that are all dedicated to selling one thing. So there's like the mannequin neighborhood and
Mm.
the, this or that neighborhood. Anyways,
Sure.
I was in what felt like the automotive theft neighborhood where it
Oh.
felt like people were like dismantling cars and selling the pieces off of them. Anyway, so I'm like, gotta get out of here. So I'm like walking briskly and I turn a corner and it was like Shangri La. Like, so
Oh,
imagine like this straight street going all the way down. And on both sides, like as far as the eye can see, there are these bolts of Egyptian cotton fabric in every color, like from the ground to the sky, just like bolts on bolts on bolts. And some
wow.
of these stalls, it's just like stall after stall, all selling fabrics. And some of them are open air and some of them have like roofs on them, but the roofs have a little hole in them and, go into the ceiling of the building. And I found out the hole is so that if you're like not finding the shade that you want of color, the shop owner will like he climbs the bolts through the hole in the ceiling and then he'll toss down more bolts of fabric and be like, this one.
What?
It was incredible. It was like paradise. And so, okay, there's one small problem. I didn't know how to sew.
Oh, oh.
I didn't know like what one does with fabric. I just knew that it was so pretty and I
Hmm.
wanted all of it. And so I started buying fabric and it kind of started accumulating in our guest room, which became a little bit of a problem. And so my husband had come back to the US for a conference, and when he came back to Cairo, he had a sewing machine in his carry-on for me.
Oh my
And he's
gosh.
like, "Here, please don't suffocate us with fabric." And so I just kind of like started watching YouTube videos and teaching myself how to sew. Um, Learning like I was nesting at the time,
Hmm.
which like nesting and learning a craft is like the perfect storm. So I started like making really ugly, horrible things that were not safe for babies. But he survived. He's resilient. So I made just like terrible stuff. I didn't know like that batting was a thing, and so I'm
Oh,
like, how do you make a quilt fluffy? And so I'm like stuffing like towels and like sewing them into the quilts and stuff, and it was a mess. It was a disaster, but that's how I kind of got my start. And when we moved back to the US a few years later, my friends had all started having babies. And so, that's great practice. So some of them got, crap quilts, like the
mhm.
first few. And then, they gradually started getting better. And yeah, that's how I kind of got into it. When I got back, I hooked up with other people who quilted and,
Mhm.
learned tips and sewing from them. Um, and just kind of like built on it. And it wasn't just quilts. I was like sewing whatever. I was terrible at clothes. Like I tried kids' clothes, like you do, and
They're so
I don't
hard.
know. They always like there's always like one sleeve like up here and one like down here, and it never worked. Um, yeah, and then I had that point that I think a lot of us hit where we're like, wow, this hobby is fun. I should monetize this,
Hmm.
and like feeling like, and like now as a therapist, I think back on that and I'm like, what was I thinking about my self worth and productivity, right? And so I
Hmm.
just felt like I had to make money to make this worth it. And so I started an Etsy shop. And this was like the nascent days of Etsy.
Hmm.
And there weren't a whole lot of shops, and there weren't very many who were doing like custom baby bedding. Now there's like a zillion, right? And
Hmm.
there's like big companies that are doing it. But I was really lucky to kind of get in when not a lot of people were doing it. So I started a shop on Etsy making custom baby bedding. And
Yeah.
really, like, what that did for me was kept me on top of what fabric lines were coming out. So that was like
Hmm.
the joy of it. The actual like sewing was awful. And as like a person who has been pregnant 3 times, I feel like I'm okay to say this. Like, pregnant women are the worst customers. Like, we are terrible. We are like, we know what we want and we want it now and like absolutely now and we need it. And so it was a really stressful job.
Mm.
Um, and at some point I was like, I don't really like this anymore. So I stopped doing it and started focusing like wholly on quilts.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, that's kind of like how I got into the quilts I'm doing now. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's wild. And you fit being a mom and all that and traveling around and you
I
know,
mean, it took
that's
time. Yeah, when the kids were little, there was like none of that going on, right?
yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of like, benevolent neglect, as a mother, which
Yeah.
is good for them.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it took a while to kind of settle into a good rhythm, right? And it was like around 2016, I think. My youngest was born. She was born super early. She was 29 weeks,
Oh, wow.
and it was really traumatic. It was a near death experience basically for me.
Mm.
And it was kind of the time that like coming out of that, I started thinking like I don't really like making stuff for other people,
Hmm.
and I don't really like making other people's patterns either. I'm not really good at following the rules. I was always tweaking it for myself and never really satisfied. And so it was kind of like a re-examining like what makes me happy.
Hmm.
Around that time, I saw an ad in the LA Times. I was in Southern California at the time, and it was for a local art museum, and they had a quilter coming to speak. And I was like, "Ooh, that's cool. I'm going to go to that, lecture and hear somebody talk about quilting, which I love to do, but I don't really know anything about. So I went, and it was Latifa Safir. And
Mm,
it was like mind blowing to me. So she and her mom were there, and her mom's showing all her quilts, and Latifah's talking about her process and her design ideas and like why she does what she does. And I'm just like, whoa, what?
yeah.
Like, because I had been kind of in traditional in baby quilts, and it was just like, it was a little bit mind blowing to me. And so I started thinking about like, what do I want to do? What do I want to say? And it coincided with QuiltCon coming back to Pasadena,
Mm,
maybe 2018 at that point. And there was, again, in the LA Times, there was an article about QuiltCon, which I'd never heard of before.
sure.
And it had a bunch of the quilts that had social justice messages. I think that was the focus of the article, maybe, or something.
Hmm.
And that was another, like, that was my second, like, brain eruption. Like, quilts can say something. Like, first of all, they
Yeah.
can be personal. So, Latifa, they can be personal, they can break the rules,
Hmm.
and still be, like, artistically incredible, and they can mean something. They, can be personal. And that was just
Yeah.
like a paradigm shift for me. And at that point, I decided to kind of lay aside, the betting stuff and the things that I didn't like and the feeling like I had to hustle, right? And be
Yeah.
like, okay, let me start approaching this as an artist. And I feel like when I did that, the balance of like kids and work, I was working in and out of nonprofits. At this time, think I had just, yeah, around that time, maybe a year later, co-founded a nonprofit helping recently resettled refugees in our
Okay.
area. And so there was a lot going on. But I feel
Hmm.
like once I like settled into the idea of an artist and not like this is a hobby and a hustle, then I feel like it like went into a flow. It felt a lot better, a lot more balanced. It wasn't easy. I mean, there's like
Sure.
ebbs and flows, and especially the last few years, I was finishing up a grad program, and that was just like my quilting was just like non-existent at that point. But I'm kind of getting back into the rhythm now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. It's wild how just like one exposure to something different can just completely open up your world and like
Yeah.
that that desire for novelty almost, but like to just be curious and know what's out there, I think really
Mm-hmm.
serves us as humans in general, but just like as makers and as artists and as quilters, it's like, there's more out there and just finding those things is really it's really incredible. And then learning like just like one or two new skills
Mm-hmm.
can change everything in your process as well because you can start seeing how things can change in what you're already doing because you just learned one new tiny thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild how quickly that can change for a person. So
And it's so cool how like person to person it's so different, but everyone seems to have like these inflection points, whether they're
mhm,
like moms taught them to quilt or they came to it later in life.
mhm.
Everyone seems to have like these important moments where it like opened up their world, right? It's got to
Yeah.
be cool for you interviewing lots of different people to be able to see that. Have you ever talked
Yeah.
about how you got into it? I don't think I've
Yeah.
heard from you.
Um, I think early on, like when my friend Miranda was still doing the show with me, she started
Mm-hmm.
it with me. We had talked about how we got into quilting, but essentially, so there's our little like pod of four. So it's me and Miranda. We didn't used to quilt, and then Jen and Beth, and they had started quilting, and they kept telling me and Miranda, like, you guys need to, like, you need to quilt. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be so fun. And we were like, no, thank you. I was
Mm-hmm.
crocheting at the time, and like I grew up super crafty. Like my mom has sewn her, basically her entire life. And so I grew up around it and knew about fabric and sewing, but it just gave me so much anxiety. And she would try to teach me, and I would just like freak out because I was so scared of breaking her machine and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I just avoided it for a long time. And then finally when I was like 31, so 7 years ago, um, they were like, Jen and Beth came to Miranda and I were like, okay, you guys are going to learn how to sew a quilt. We're going to help you. We're going to hold your hand. We'll take you to the fabric store. We'll pick out fabrics. We'll pick out a pattern and we'll walk you through the whole thing. So we did. I, of course, was like, well, if I'm going to make a quilt, it's got to be big enough. And so I made a twin size yellow brick road,
Mm-hmm.
which now I'm like, that's so easy. But when you've never,
But it
mm,
felt so daunting at the time, right?
right. Well, and just
Yeah.
because I was like making such a big quilt, like why
Mhm.
didn't I start with a throw or a baby size? No, I'm like, no, if I'm putting in the time and effort,
Go
it's gonna
all
be,
in.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm 5'8", it's like my husband's like 6 foot. So I'm like, we need a big quilt. We can't, these like tiny little lap quilts don't cut it. So
Mhm.
anyway, so we went and picked fabric one day and I just picked, a bunch of fat quarters and just went to town on picking my favorite, teals and purples. And I'm a cool colors girl. So
Mhm.
Um, and then we spent an entire day, like they showed me how to square up the fat quarters before I started cutting and how to use the rotary cutter with the ruler and how to like, you know, use the seam allowance and or the 1/4 inch foot to make the seam allowance. And um it was like a 9 a.m. to midnight kind of day and I went home
Mhm.
sobbing.
Oh, jeez.
So yeah. I was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. But my quilt top was done and it was in
Yeah.
Jen's hands. She had been long arming. Um, she had taken the class to be able to rent the machines at our local quilt shop because her mom is a quilter too, but she has Jen long arm all of her quilts. And she just makes the tops and she's like, okay, here you go, you do it.
Yeah.
So she was like, I'll long arm your quilt top and Beth will bind it. You don't have to do that part yet, but like you'll have a finished quilt and it'll be great. And so once I got the finished product, I was like, okay, maybe I can make another one. And so I made one for my mom and I made a jelly roll race and I like still slowly started like easing in and like now it's just
Mhm.
gangbusters. Like I can't stop.
Yeah.
So
Right.
anyway, that was in 20,
Yeah.
I started in 2017, learned to long arm in 2018, and then that same in 2018 in the summer, that's when um, my mom and I bought a long arm and we started our business. And now I'm
Mhm.
officially the full owner of FPP Design Company. So
Mhm.
that's it's been a crazy 7 years.
That's really cool. That's a lot, like crammed into 7 years. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I was teaching full time all that time up until
Oh my gosh.
2021. So
Yeah. What grade?
I taught third grade.
Okay. Oh, that's a
Yeah,
lot of energy. That's a lot of energy.
yeah.
I have a third grader right now,
Oh
and
yeah.
whew,
So
man,
you're like,
yeah,
oh my God, sit down, please. Um,
yeah.
there it's such a fun age though, because the difference, and I mean, you see a huge difference in all like grade levels, but I just felt like in third grade there was such a huge leap from the beginning of the year to like they came in little kids and they left big kids.
Oh no, don't tell me that because it's
But
my
it's like
youngest that's in third grade,
I
and
know, but it's
I'm
like
not
a
ready for that.
magical time because they're still
Yeah,
curious and they're still so excited, but they like learn some really incredible independent thinking skills and
yeah.
they start to be more self-assured. Like you can just like see them blossom into like their own little
Hmm.
personalities more. And it's just like I just always was like sobbing a mess every year at the end of the year, like,
Yeah.
bye, bye, babies.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah. So it was fun
That's
until it
great.
wasn't. And then
Hmm.
I decided to quit and do the business full time. So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
very
So
cool.
it's
That's great.
it's been exciting, but yeah, so I haven't been quilting very long, but
Hmm.
it's been a whirlwind and I've
Yeah.
loved all of it. It's been so exciting. But
Hmm.
so getting to learn
That's
new
great.
skills is like really cool because I've
Hmm.
always seen like garment making and, you know, curtains and my mom does everything. And
Hmm.
she never really quilted until about a year and a half before I started. So we kind of went on our journey together, which was fun.
That's kind of fun. That's nice to like do it like, and especially for your, it's funny how you talked about your friends like saying, okay, you're going to learn how to sew. It like sounded like an intervention.
It
Like,
kind of was.
you have crafty energy and we are going to release
They're
it.
like, bitch, you're gonna sew. And I'm like, I don't want
Exactly.
to.
Yeah. And you're going to like
Yeah.
it.
And they were right. So
I have
it's
friends like that.
it worked out for the best, I guess.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
I went all in hard and
Hmm.
they're like,
Yeah.
wow, wow. Like
Yeah.
eldest daughter millennial energy here. Like
Uh-huh.
and same with
That's
you.
what
It's
it
like,
is.
oh, I had to monetize my craft and
Hmm.
now I'm like, oh, but now I'm like, how do I do soft living and be a boss babe? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like finding that balance is hard. It's different for everyone, right? Because like there's people who absolutely love that business part of it. For me, I was
Hmm.
terrible at it. I always
Hmm.
wanted to be like, I'm sorry that you have to pay for what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah.
I'm a terrible business person. Um, yeah, so
It's hard. It's really hard to ask people for money, but I'm
yeah.
also like, you better pay me. But then I'm like,
Uh-huh.
please, I'm sorry.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
don't hate me for asking you for money for my time and my materials
Right.
and my expertise. Like, no,
Yeah.
I actually, yeah, you owe me money. That's
Right.
been a huge mindset shift.
Mhm. Getting like knowing like the value of your time, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, there's this part of me that really is adamant that like, I need to be respected and paid for the time and effort that I put into it. And then this other part of me that's just like, nah, I don't know, whatever you want to pay, you know? So,
You're like, I don't know. What do
so
you
maybe
think
it's
is
a good
fair?
thing this isn't like my income stream. It would be
Right.
a terrible idea.
Uh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough.
Hmm.
I can tell you that. But
Yeah.
it's when you find people who also find value in what you're doing, it's like,
Hmm.
then it's fine. They don't have a
Yeah.
problem paying because they know what they're getting, but it's
Right.
the
And
people who
that's
don't
lovely.
understand.
Right, yeah. The people who are like, "But I could go buy a quilt at Target." You're like, "Well, then go buy a quilt at Target."
By all means, be my
Yeah,
guest. Yeah.
yeah. When I was
Mm.
selling baby bedding, it was like because it's custom, you have to price it for the labor and the fabric and everything like that. And and there was this part of me that just wanted to be because I had, small kids at the time. I had a
Mhm.
baby and I just wanted to be like when people would like, send me a message and ask me about, the dimensions of the sheet and the price and all this stuff or whatever and the thread count. I just wanted to be like, actually just go buy it at Target because your baby's gonna poop on it. Don't pay me for this. Like,
Right.
don't buy my custom bedding. It's ridiculous, you
Yeah.
know?
You're
And
like,
but
top secret
yeah,
message. Like,
yeah, I'm like, it doesn't matter.
yeah.
So, anyways, but my
Yeah.
husband would always be like, if they want it and you can provide it, that will
Yeah.
make them happy. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
yeah.
funny, like, too, if it's like a first time parent, especially, you're like, you
Mm-hmm.
don't know. You don't even
Yeah.
know.
And I have to imagine, like, I have no idea, but I have to imagine that like 99% of my customers had to be first time parents.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine, like, on my second, well, I had twins next, so my
Oh
second slash
gosh.
third child, I cannot imagine being like, yeah, I am going to pay like, I don't even remember what I charged, but some obscene amount for a
Yeah.
sheet because it has colorful giraffes on it. No, like,
Yeah.
put down some newspaper. It'll be like just as effective.
You're like,
Okay,
throw
I
some
didn't really
straw
mean
in
it,
there.
yeah,
It'll be fine.
exactly.
It'll be
Yeah.
fine. And just change it out when they poop on it because they
Right.
will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
Yeah.
But it's like also, you know, dreamy for them to like have
Yeah.
this aesthetic nursery for their baby and like
Hmm.
be able to have that feeling of like doing something special for their child. And it's
And
like,
I think that's exactly it, right? There's something
mhm,
just like really fulfilling to create the environment like you envision for your
yeah,
child, right? And so there
yeah,
was like a special, thing to being a part of that, to being
yeah.
like, oh, okay, so you're imagining like, you know, nautical mermaid, boho, whatever. Let me think about how to do that for you. It was cool. It was kind of cool to like be on that journey and be like, let's make your vision come true.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. That can be like the flip side of it because you can be dreading it, but also like,
Mhm.
well, I know I can make this person happy and I know I can help them get what they want. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'll help you. It's like
Mhm.
almost
Right.
begrudgingly sometimes only just I think because like for me at least, it's hard to explain to people if they don't really understand either like what they're asking for or the level of like
Mhm.
work that I'm going to have to do to provide that vision
Yeah.
for them. And
Yeah.
so if you can't just like buy a novelty fabric with those things on it, it's like, okay, well, now we have to go into customizing and now we have to go into like
Mhm.
how do I create this vision, in a way that makes sense for my business and makes sense
Mhm.
for the time that they're going to be paying me for. Like I just turn people down sometimes because I'm like, what you're asking for is literally going to cost you thousands of dollars because of my
Mhm.
time. My
Mhm.
time will be taken up. I'm like,
Right.
after labor, like the materials aren't that much, but my labor is going to
Mhm.
make this thing like $3,000. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm like, learn how to sew and you can do this thing by hand and then you won't have to pay anybody.
Yeah. And it's nice to be honest. Like as a
Yeah.
customer, I feel like I would appreciate that. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard though, like to find that balance and like not feel apologetic about it, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, have you
Right.
found, I mean, because you mentioned like, apologizing for asking people to pay you
Mhm.
money, but like as you've shifted kind of gears into the more of the education space,
Yeah.
has that like become easier? Does
Mhm.
that feel more valuable, I guess, to
Definitely.
you as like what you're providing?
It does. I mean, partly because I love teaching. Like
Mm,
that is like I think one of my favorite things about this whole quilting journey, right? I love teaching. I enjoy it. I feel like my students enjoy it. Um, the fact that they walk away having like learned something, that's really cool to me. And I love like sharing that creative energy. So it's really fulfilling. And then on the business side of it, it's nice to just like set a price,
mhm,
right? And to talk to other quilters who are doing similar things and find out, okay, like what are we all charging? What seems fair? What seems fair for a guild? And then also, like equity pricing is a really cool thing to be able to provide as like an independent person, right? I'm not
mhm.
part of a business. I'm not working, on Etsy or where I have like different, restrictions or structures to work within. I'm selling my own product as a teacher. And so I can
Yeah.
say, so like for the foundation paper piecing design course, I have equity pricing on there, where people can pay the standard fee of 75. Or if they're in a really comfortable position in life and they want to kind of pay some forward, they can pay 85. Or if they're not, if they are like having a hard time, and I don't ask, I don't need anyone to prove it, right? Because we're all at different places in our lives, then they can pay a lower amount.
Yeah.
And what I found is that people tend to be generous and it like balances and evens out like perfectly. And I find that I have been compensated for like my time and what I put into it. And I think people seem happy with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really nice. Like for QuiltCon, they have a price. I have a price, or at quilt shows
Mhm.
that I teach at. I have kind of my set. I don't go below this. And if I'm traveling and, have to eat, like you have to hit these marks, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to just have that like there.
Mhm.
And having done this for so many years has built my confidence and my own sense of my, value and worth.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel pretty comfortable. I don't really have to negotiate anymore. I don't have to like prove that I'm worth it or be like, I'm sorry, I promise the students will really enjoy this, Like I know that they're going to enjoy it because,
Yeah.
I've heard the feedback. I've taught long enough. So, yeah, I don't have to be like, please pay for you. So,
Yeah.
it helps. It's a good place to be in. It's taken a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so nice though, like to just feel confident in what you're saying and like
Hmm.
if you don't want to pay this, then you okay, then you just don't
Yeah.
get what I've got. It's like
Right. Yeah.
which is I think
Yeah.
it's fine. Not everybody I do like that you have equity pricing though, because I think sometimes it can be tricky to like I want to learn this skill, but I don't
Hmm.
necessarily have $75 right now. But
Hmm.
I know like I could use this skill moving forward and it could potentially help me, make more money or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel
So,
really confident with foundation paper piecing design because it's teaching like something that people can they're going to make their own patterns. Like
yeah.
that's something that I feel like either in like, personal satisfaction or if they're pattern writing or making a business, right? I feel like it's going to pay them back. So
Yeah.
I feel a little bit, more like it's going to be worth it. If you're in a place where you can pay for it, awesome.
Mhm.
But, I feel good about people being able to pay for that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
yeah.
I'm signed up and I'm very excited. And I felt like it was so reasonable because like, yeah, it is. You're getting a new skill and something that you can use or me, I can use, to design my own patterns. And there are
Hmm.
things where sometimes I'm like, I can't find anything to help this person make this quilt that they want, right? Because my whole
Hmm.
job is not just long arming, but making custom quilts for people. And so
Yeah.
that's a frustration point I hit a lot is somebody wants something specific. And even though I'm scouring the internet, I can't seem to find what I'm looking for in a foundation
Hmm.
paper piece block, or I don't know
Yeah.
how to design my own to make it. So I'm just like hit a point where like, I'm so sorry. I don't think I can do this for you. And I
Hmm.
hate that. If it's
Yeah.
something I want to do, if it's a project I want to take on and I want to help the client, when I hit a wall and I feel like I can't, I'm just like,
Hmm.
oh my God. I
Yeah.
get so mad at the world,
Hmm.
but I mean, it's like fleeting. It goes away quickly, but um
Hmm.
it's just that point where I'm like, shit, I can't do this. Like this is
Yeah.
such a bummer. And at what point am I spending more time for free trying to make this thing happen when
Hmm.
I haven't even gotten confirmation from this person or a down payment from this person to keep spending
Hmm.
more than like an hour? Because that's
Right.
kind of like the time I allot myself to like communicate with a person and try to come up with uh an agreeable plan to see if they're going to move forward, because
Hmm.
past that I'm like, okay, now you're going to start owing me money because you're wasting my time and I'm
Yeah.
wasting my time by talking to you and not getting anywhere with it. But anyway,
I like that you have that boundary. I think it's really hard for us to to set limits like that
yeah.
and be comfortable with them.
Yeah. I think too, I've come across like multiple other creatives, and I think especially women, where we feel like because we're doing a creative we're creatives, and but we also
Hmm.
feel like we owe people our time, and we owe people like that, again, that apologetic nature
Yeah.
coming forward of like, I'm so sorry that I'm asking you to pay for this, or of
Hmm.
course I'll keep spending time with you. It's like, no, I have limits. Like we all have to
Hmm.
have limits. And even in the creative space, like your time is valuable, and trying to find that balance and trying to find that point where it's like, okay, I'm done with this.
Hmm.
This is now you're just running me around, or like I'm not
Right.
getting anything out of this. It's like where is that? Wow, I'm
Hmm.
stuttering.
Hmm.
Like where is that point? And it's different for everybody. Like some
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
can have, they can give people more leash, and or some people have a very short leash because they're just like, I don't have time for you. And that's
Hmm.
fine. Like,
Right.
but being able to communicate that is also, I think, key. And I mean, yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot, because I think also people they don't see creative businesses as valuable as
Hmm.
like, oh, well, I do have a degree too. And it's like, well, why aren't you doing that? I'm like, because I don't want to. I don't have to, and I
Yeah,
don't
no,
want
I think
to.
you're right. I think there's like two things going on here, right? There's like
Mhm.
our own mindset, like shifting into that. My creative energy, the time I spend creating is just as valuable as an engineer, like putting together a tool or whatever engineers do. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure. you know, but like, first of all, giving ourselves value as women and in the creative work that we do, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And the fact that, society views quilting
Hmm.
as a craft and not an art, and then art as a whole as not a business, not a
Hmm.
corporate model, right? And so
Yeah.
having like these two things, you know
Hmm.
combined, and you can see why we get so apologetic, especially because demographically we do tend to be more women, and so we have that kind of ingrained in us
Yeah.
already, and so we're struggling, and our customers are struggling against these things that are even unconscious, even we don't even realize. And
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. That unconscious bias of like women's work being less valuable
Hmm.
is like,
Right.
it's ugly, but
Hmm.
we're just going to combat it one quilt at a time, and it's
One quilt
fine.
at a time. Yes.
One business babe at a time. No.
Uh-huh.
So you're a counselor. So like where
Mhm.
in this process of quilting and raising kids and all that, did you have your degree before, like when you guys went to Cairo, or did you get it
No,
during?
so I had graduated with an undergraduate in political science, from Notre Dame, and was thinking I was going to go to law school, and that was just like the plan. That's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I applied to law school and got into law school, and then it comes like the date where you're supposed to like confirm like which
Mm.
school you're going to go to, and I just like, and this is so not like me. It just like it hurts my stomach to even think that I did this. I just let that date come and go. I didn't do anything about it. And
Wow.
now that I say, oh, I'm getting like chills. And like, how could I do? Oh,
Yeah.
that's just like horrific to me. But then it was just like a realization, like, I don't want to do this,
Yeah.
And so um, I ended up using that degree to go into kind of nonprofit work. So when I was in Cairo, I was also doing graduate work in refugee studies there.
Okay.
I back in the U.S., I worked at nonprofits around homeless populations. Like I said, in California, when the Syrian civil war started,
Mhm.
We had an influx of Syrian refugees and not a whole lot of resources
Okay.
beyond like the first 90 days of services they get. And so some friends and I saw that and founded a nonprofit to kind of connect community services with resettled refugees. And so I used my degree in that way.
Mhm.
And then it was about 5 or 6 years ago when we moved to Logan, Utah, where I am right now. And, I'm away from uh, the nonprofit that I was, so heavily involved in. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, like, what am I going to do? Like, what do I want to do? And I had already started thinking, I'd been, in my mind for a while, I was like, yeah, I want to be a therapist. The
Mhm.
thing that I love the most about the work that I've done has been like the one on one, like from the very
Mhm.
beginning, the one on one counseling with people, more from a social work aspect of like, let's connect with resources. What do you need? How do we do this?
Yeah.
But like the real personal connection was just like really valuable to me. And so, yeah, so my husband teaches at Utah State, and the wonderful thing about having an academic spouse is a tuition discount.
Yeah.
So I got my degree here, my master's degree in social work, and focused on clinical social work and basically being a therapist. Um, Finished that last year, and I've loved it. It's nice to like I have an all the things mindset. That's why my Instagram is like quilt all the things. I'm just like everything, bring it to me now.
Yeah.
I was worried that I would like go through this intensive degree program and come out and just be like, I don't really want this.
Yeah.
But I'm in private practice with a fantastic practice here, and I absolutely love it. It is wonderful, and I feel like I'm doing what I want to be doing. Um, I feel like my quilting is better for it because I'm in a really good place. I'm in a very like self-aware opening up
Mhm.
of myself and who I am. It's this great phase of life too, where like I said, my youngest is in third grade. I've just, gotten my graduate degree and gone into the career that I want. I feel like I'm becoming myself, like in like a new era of life.
Yeah.
And I feel like my quilting is starting to reflect that more. And so it's just kind of an all over great thing. So yeah, that's how I got into therapy.
Wow,
So,
that's incredible.
yeah.
My
Yeah.
husband's actually in his internship year for
Mhm.
his counseling degree also in
Wonderful.
master's. So
That's great.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think he was kind of in that same boat of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. And
Mhm.
but now that he's in it, he's working or he's interning both at an agency, like an addiction
Uh-huh.
agency and in a private practice.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, yeah, I think I'm gonna be okay at this. I'm like, I think you are
Nice.
too. Like, it's gonna be great. I'm
It's
like,
nice to get
literally
both
everybody you
views
know.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. When
Exactly.
I my first internship was at the local high school. And
Oh,
so it was all
okay.
teenagers, and it was pretty intensive. There's not a lot of great mental health resources at the
Yeah.
schools here. And so like I went in day one and they like handed me like a list of names, and they're like, here are your students. Most of them are suicidal. And they're like, go. And I'm like,
Ah.
like, I just started classes. I don't know what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so it was just like, it was so scary. And I had like a period where I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. Like, I can't.
Yeah.
But you settle into the internship and you figure out like what you like, what you don't. I was like, I thought I would be terrified of teenagers. It turns out I love teenagers.
Mm.
My next internship was in the private practice that I'm working at now, which was
Mm.
wonderful because I got to see like, oh, this is like exactly the kind of, business model and community and environment, I want to work in.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
just, applied and got hired when I graduated. But that was nice because then I got to compare school social work with, private practice. And I
Hmm.
just loved the diversity of being able to see anyone.
Yeah.
So that's really
Yeah.
nice. That's
That's
cool for
so
your
cool.
husband. I'm
Yeah,
excited for him.
I am too. I think he it's really just like has helped him grow and me too, because like of course I'm like learning things right along with him, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like
Yeah. Yeah.
finding new levels of myself and
Mm-hmm.
learning more about myself so that I can confidently set boundaries with clients and I
Mm-hmm.
can confidently set boundaries with my just in my life in general, because coming out of people pleasing is so hard, and
Yeah.
even recognizing when you're doing it is so
Mm-hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
And so being able to like learn more about myself through the work he's doing and just like
Mm-hmm.
listening to the books that he would have to read, but he'd also get them on Audible so he could like listen and read along at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Um And so then I go back and like listen to some of them or like read some of them and I'm like, oh my God, like my whole brain just broke. Like,
What's been transformative for you?
oh my gosh. So many things. So many things. I think really just like learning about the depth of my people pleasing and why
Mm,
it's there.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
ultimately been like the one thing that has like flipped for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not been easy. It's not just like it's switched and everything's perfect and fine now,
Yeah.
but gaining that new perspective on me and my existence and like why things have been a certain way in my life. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, like
Yeah.
now we need to change these things because we're not happy or, as I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to myself, but um just and being in a safe space, like my husband and I working together to create a safe space where we can both be vulnerable with each other and
Mm-hmm.
have those growth
Yeah.
moments and have those moments of just like utter meltdown breakdown of like grieving, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like through all of it, through growth is also grieving because you have to
Yeah,
let go of
absolutely.
parts of yourself that you held on to almost like a security blanket, I guess, of
Mm-hmm.
sorts. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of stepping into like, okay, now, like, how am I going to be in the
yeah,
world? I
yeah.
don't
What does that
know,
even
but
look like?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that like your clients are kind of in that same boat of like they know what they need to change, but it's like a scary step forward and they don't know what that looks like, and so
Mm-hmm.
they kind of hesitate? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's human nature, right? We all
yeah,
do. Like you said, it's a security blanket and stepping into the unknown, even if we know that ultimately it's probably going to be good for us,
yeah,
it's so hard. It's so
hmm,
hard to say like I'm going to be brave, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to see what happens, you know?
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's the great thing about therapy is like you have a friend, well, not a friend, but you have a person to, to be there to like talk with you along the way and guide you and say, okay, this worked, this didn't work,
hmm,
how did it make you feel?
right, yeah.
Yeah.
How does that make you
So,
feel? Like,
yeah.
quit asking me that. No, I'm just kidding.
I sometimes I find myself saying that and I'm just like, I want to apologize. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like
You're
how
like,
many different ways can I phrase that without being like a cliche,
I know, I know. Well, my husband
Like,
and I have had
tell
that
me
same
more.
conversation. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
how does that make you feel? I'm like, stop talking. Don't say those words to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, I
My
feel
kids are like, stop
crazy.
therapizing me, mom.
Oh yeah, I've had my moments. I'm like, you're not my therapist. He's like, sorry. He's like, wow, I touched a nerve. I'm like, yeah, now stop talking to me. And then I'll come back later and be like, I'm sorry that I had such an emotional reaction. I'm ready to talk about it now. I understand why I had such a problem with that. Like,
That's good communication.
yeah,
That's great.
it's been it's been interesting, but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
been kind of fun. And in the sense that like I feel like I know me and I know him
Hmm.
so much more, and that
Yeah.
allows me to come into the podcast, come into
Hmm.
Sweet Pea more fully and more
Hmm.
present and more connected to what I want out of it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um so I
Yeah,
don't know
it's
if you
amazing
feel the
how
same.
like a good connection, like a good partnership, um, like when that's healthy, it affects everything.
Hmm,
Um, it's neat to work with. I've really liked working with couples. I'm kind of like heading more in that direction.
hmm,
And specifically sex therapy is kind of an area of
mm,
interest that I'm looking at, kind of pursuing certification in. So I do a lot of that and seeing how like because that's an area where people have disconnect, right? And
yeah,
it's so hard to be vulnerable and it's so hard to communicate about it. And it's one of those things where like once you like see people starting to learn how to communicate with each other
hmm,
and learning how to be open and vulnerable, like it spills out into everything.
yeah,
It changes like each individual's, life outlook, the way they are in the world, the way they
hmm,
approach things. I like that. I like that you can work like in relationship and then see it just kind of keep on going.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Communication is, and if you've never really been taught how, like it's a
Hmm.
hard fought battle to learn
Yeah.
how. And
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
if you're not in a secure attachment like relationship,
Hmm.
it's scary.
Hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
scary. And I think that's where part of that, like, because so few people have secure attachment like
Hmm.
style, they don't come out of their childhood homes with a secure attachment. So communication can be hard because you feel like you're going to drive people away, or you feel like you shouldn't have to explain yourself to people, or whatever that
Hmm.
leads to. So then, like, having to learn how to be like, no, my needs matter,
Yeah.
and I should be
Right.
able to speak them without punishment or without fear.
Hmm.
Like, that's a really hard leap. And I
Yeah.
think it comes across that, again, like in the maker space and in creative business, it's like,
Hmm.
if you're not aware of your communication style and the way that you perceive relationships with other people, then it can be really hard to communicate. Like, if somebody has a question, it can come across as criticism, and you're like, how dare you say that to me? But then if you like
Hmm.
take that lens off and look at it differently and reread the same thing, it's like a completely different message, right? So
Yeah. Right. Right.
it's interesting, but
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. I love
yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, okay. So we already mentioned it, but I want to talk about it more. The your
Hmm.
foundation paper piecing
Hmm.
course that you just launched. I'm
Yeah.
enrolled, like I said, and so I want
Yay.
to know, like, what went into that, because I you taught
Hmm.
at QuiltCon in, I guess, technically this year in,
Yeah. It
I know,
feels
I'm
like a
like
long time
last
ago,
year.
doesn't
I'm
it?
like, no, this is the same year.
Yeah.
I think because new QuiltCon is rolling up, like rolling around, and it's like 25,
Hmm.
25. I'm like, yeah, last year. Um
Yeah.
it's like saying last year when you're in a new school year, but you're still in the same year. Anyway, um, so yeah, like, was it just something you felt like um could be more time effective for you, because
Hmm.
instead of like going to individual places and teaching in person, this is like more of a blanket way to do that. Not, no pun intended, but
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
No, I like that. That's great. Yeah, so like putting together the course in the first place, like it's something that I was frustrated when I wanted to learn it because there were so many things I wanted to make and I couldn't figure out like how to do it.
Mhm,
And there's just like there's guidance on a lot of different things, but there is almost nothing on how to design an FPP pattern. And
mhm.
so I was just like, why do the lines go there? Like, I don't understand. Like, how do you know what order to put them in?
Yeah.
And nobody's telling me this, you know? And I remember being at QuiltCon, maybe, I can't remember which one, and talking to another person who's really well known for her FPP. And I said, I, I want to figure out like how to teach this because I remember being so frustrated. And I, years ago, I took a course from Sarah Sharp, who has a book on it. And that was kind of what gave me the basis, right?
Mhm.
To kind of start jumping in. And once I did, I really enjoyed it. And so I'm talking to this friend and I'm like, I want to teach it, but I'm a little afraid. And she's like, oh no, you can't teach that. She says, she's like, I thought about that too. And I don't even know how we would do that. She said, it's like, it's a whole different like mindset than we're used to in quilting. And so she's like, I've thought about it and I just don't know like how. And for me, I was like, challenge, you know?
Yeah.
And I took it home and I thought about like, what is that mindset? Like, what is the shift that like, it's really hard to go from regular piecing to FPP designing, right? Like, what is the shift? And I realized it's a different like spatial vocabulary.
Mhm.
It's a different way of looking at shapes and looking at piecing. And at the same time, it's not, you know, if we can just like understand the vocabulary, understand kind of like what we're looking at, right? Um, then we can use our quilters tools. We can use like all of the like skills we've built in our brains with piecing, with especially like log cabins and things like that
Yeah.
to understand how an FPP pattern comes together. And so I just kind of jumped on that and it was like, you know, like cramming it all in. It was just like this like time period of like sketching and writing and erasing and crumpling it up and throw it in the paper, you know, in the
Yeah.
trash can and stuff like that. And finally coming up with a way that I thought would work for students. I'm trying to remember if this last QuiltCon was the first time I've taught it or if I taught it the year before, and I can't remember. And that feels really like alarming to me. Like, shouldn't I be able to remember that? But yeah, I felt like I had figured out a method where we go from like the very basics.
Uh-huh.
and like work in this progression until you can get from a photograph to a design. And I could do it in 3 hours, and I was really like excited. So yeah, teaching it at QuiltCon was very cool because there's this moment that I always see in class that's so fun as a teacher. And it hits people at different times,
Mhm.
depending on the person, right? But there's always this moment where somebody, like, it clicks, like the vocabulary, the spatial reasoning, all just like comes together in their brain. And they're like looking at their paper, or like working through one of the things we're doing together. And they're like, oh, oh, there's like
Yeah.
this. I always hear that sound or see that face and little gasp. And it's just like, for me as a teacher, I'm just like, woo, I'm so excited. It's like dopamine,
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I know that they've gotten it. And so it just like built my confidence that, yeah, like people are getting this. And people were also really frustrated because the only place I was teaching this was at QuiltCon. It's the only like venue that I felt was worth my while, money
Mm-hmm.
and time wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get kind of a return on what I was putting into it. Um, so I wasn't really teaching it to guilds. I did a few guild workshops, and I reserve just like a few of my guild bookings to do this as a workshop because it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot,
Yeah.
especially if I'm doing online, like doing it over Zoom. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but QuiltCon sells out so fast,
Yeah.
it just like, and I'm all about like accessibility and include, like I want people to be able to get what they want, and like everyone, and you don't have to like set your alarm and then like, be first in the waiting list and have
Mm.
the money to pay to go to QuiltCon to take the class and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Um and so yeah, so I just like toyed with the idea of like putting on online, making a design course, and with grad school I was just so busy. And then the 2 weeks after I graduated, between graduation and starting my job, I like dedicated those to filming these videos and putting them together. And then I kind of played with them over the summer and
Mm-hmm.
got it and had a few people kind of test them out. And I was like, okay, I've got something here that works. And so, yeah, so it was really fun to launch them and put them up. And I do it in limited enrollment. I want to be there like for students to talk to when they have
Mm-hmm.
questions. And so I just kind of open it up for just like small cohorts. And so like in the morning, like before we signed on here, I was just answering emails. People saying like, okay, so I've gotten to this point and I did this and I'm not sure if it works, am I going to run into a problem later or whatever? And so it's
Yeah.
really fun to
Yeah.
like hop on a quick call or, kind of work on it, together over email, to
Yeah.
kind of help students get it. Because like my goal is like not to like sell you a class and you do a skill and maybe like learn it, maybe you don't, because I've taken plenty of classes that are like that I never think about again.
Right.
I want people to like get what they want out of it. And it's really rewarding for me to like build something that I know is going to be like a lifelong skill, that I know that somebody could take it and become an FPP designer, like
Yeah.
write their own patterns or make incredible quilts that are in shows or things like that. Like that is the end goal for me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, long
awesome.
answer to your question, but yeah, that's
No,
kind
it's
of like
great.
how it came about and like why I put it up there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, and I anticipate like every few months I'll open the enrollment again and I'll just announce it on my Instagram page. And
Okay.
yeah, and people can just like, yeah, see
Okay.
how it goes for them.
So if people didn't get into this cohort, then they
Mm-hmm.
can just look for future
Yeah.
announcements when you open it up again. Okay. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like a one-time only
No.
thing, which is great too, because I
Yeah.
think it is a skill people want. And
Mm-hmm.
clearly, if you've already like had people like miss out on signing up and are like, hey, I want it
Yeah, there's
in.
definitely like demand, which is really nice to
Yeah.
know that, yeah, there's plenty of people who want to do it. I'm teaching it at QuiltCon again in Phoenix. I'm like, where are we going this year?
Hmm.
Phoenix. And I'm doing one 3 hour workshop, which is kind of like the standard model. But I'm also like trying out a 6 hour where we do basically
Mm.
the FPP design workshop in the morning. In the afternoon, we move to a sewing machine room and we're actually making the patterns that people have
Okay.
designed. So yeah, so I'm like excited to see how that goes because it's really fun to learn a skill and be like, oh, I got this, and have a paper at the end of class. We're like, look, I made my picture into a pattern, right? But
Yeah.
then to actually like start sewing it, like that's like another level of like awesomeness. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
excited to see like how that works out. So
Yeah. That'll be really cool to like
hmm
to be able to test that and see what that is like. And yeah, because it's like when you take a class and you learn the thing, but you don't get to actually do it, it's like,
yeah.
okay. And then you have all this energy and you want to do it. But then if you're at QuiltCon and you've just learned this
hmm
thing and you don't have you can't just like run
Yes.
home to your sewing room, you're like,
Right.
well, shit. Like, And I know
Yeah,
there's like
exactly.
all this momentum after, but
And that's one of my big frustrations with like anything like QuiltCon because I mean, I think we like so many of us because we're creatives have this experience where we go and we learn things or we see things in the quilt show and we're so inspired and we want to do all the things and we're always like if only we could build like 3 or 4 days into the end of QuiltCon that's just making,
yeah,
that are just like dedicated like we just go in and put on our headphones and we sew things,
yeah,
because I go to QuiltCon and then I come home and I unpack all my stuff and then I get back to life,
yeah,
and I all I want is just like, a week straight of just nothing but me and my sewing machine making all
yeah,
these things. So it's really I was thinking like how can I like channel that excitement of,
yeah,
oh my gosh, I'm designing my own pattern and be like, okay, now let's make it. Let's do it.
yeah,
And so I'm excited to see. I
yeah,
think it'll be good.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a learn, make, and take. And those are
Mhm.
always exciting. I love
Yeah.
takes. It's a
Yeah.
good time because I'm like,
Yeah, it
oh,
is.
look what I did. And
Yeah, you're like, I didn't just learn it in my head. I did it.
yeah, and I'm like, I'm a
Yeah.
doer. Like I need to do something to learn it, to really like
Mhm.
understand it. And
Same
so
here. Yeah.
when I get to do make and takes, then it's like now I can repeat that because I've done it and
Mhm.
I have like the muscle memory now to like make I don't need the instructions anymore,
Yeah. Yeah,
which
right.
is really exciting for me, but also like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I'm just sitting in a class and I don't get to actually touch things and do things, I'm like, did I learn anything today? Like,
Right. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
taking notes, but I'm like, no, I need to do the thing. So
Mhm.
that's exciting that you're able
Yeah.
to try that new model, and I'll be interested to hear how that goes because
Mhm.
I mean, I'll be at QuiltCon, so I'll have to find you and ask
Yeah,
you.
for
But
sure.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I that's exciting. Yeah, I tried to get in. I tried to get in,
Mhm.
and it was already waitlisted.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy how fast they sell out.
It's so quick,
I'm
man.
like,
It
how
is
am I
just
already
I
10,000th in
know.
line
I
in the
know.
queue online? I'm like, this is crazy because I went in as soon as the time, it's like,
Mhm.
but it's just how
Yeah.
things work. And I get that they have to they have to like monitor things and make sure things are done as fairly as possible. And especially when
Mhm.
it's such a big event, it's like
Right.
I know that there's
Yeah.
certain parameters and there's certain boundaries they have to keep to, and I know people get
Mhm.
mad, but it's like they can only do so much, and
Yeah, you can only like fit so many students in a classroom.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and you only have so many classrooms with so many time slots available for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to try to offer a wide variety of different types of classes that people
Mhm.
want to take, and
Right.
yeah, so it's understandable. It's a frustrating thing just because it's like I want to
Mhm.
take this class, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, next time I gotta be even earlier. I don't know,
Yeah, like how is it even
whatever.
possible? I don't know. Yeah.
And I don't think I'm because this will just be my second QuiltCon, like
Mhm.
I don't know that I'm in the headspace to like go and sit and take a class yet, like
Mhm.
because last year, this year
Right.
I did it. This year was so like it was a lot to take in. I had such a great
Mhm.
time, and I was so excited to be there, and like having strangers recognize me from the podcast, I was like, I'm so
Mhm.
sweaty. This is crazy. Um, my mom was like, it's so cute. I'm like, okay. I mean, I accept. But
Yeah, I'll take it.
yeah. So I think just like having done the first one, gotten that out of my system,
Mhm.
it's not so like anxiety inducing because I kind of know what to expect and like
Yeah.
how to kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like pace myself,
Mhm.
and because we like tried to do all the quilt show in one day and
Oh,
like
yeah.
did vendors,
No.
the rest of the time and just like kept
Yeah.
finding people I knew
Uh-huh.
and dragging my mom around. I'm like, I'm sorry that I keep stopping and talking to a million people. She's like, are you kidding me? This is great. You're like, you're in your element and I get to shop. So
Oh, that's nice. That's
yeah.
wonderful. Is she going with you this year?
I don't think so,
Mhm.
but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Things are changing, but um
Okay.
I'm definitely going. Yeah, it'll be exciting, but well, yeah, I'm excited to hear how that goes for you because I think it'll be interesting to see. I wonder, and just like from the participants' like perspective, like are they going to find more value in being able to create their design after, or
Mhm.
make their design after they've designed it, and
Mhm.
is that going to hold more value for them in the long
Mhm.
run, and just kind of be able to survey people and know.
Yeah, right.
Are
And
you gonna
like, will it kind of solidify the skills that you've learned, you
yeah.
know? Is it going to kind of lock them into your brain even more
Mhm.
than if you had just like created the pattern and then took it home, you know? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's repeats. Like, did they take it last year and now they're gonna, or last time and they're gonna take it again? And
Hmm.
is there gonna be a difference for those people? Like, I just want all the data. Like
Yeah, I know, me too.
coming from the
Yeah, and I
teaching
do
space,
know
like
there's like a couple people who took the workshop at QuiltCon and also signed up for the online course because they're like, I want to be able to go back and like revisit this anytime or whatever,
yeah,
which is kind of cool. So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's the nice thing about online stuff too, is like you can go back and
Hmm.
access the
Yeah, you always have
material.
it there.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead of being like, what
Yeah.
did she say? Like, I didn't write that down, or
Yeah. Yeah, especially with FPP because like until like you really get it down and that takes a lot of practice, there's always going to be the point, and I hit it sometimes too, where you sit down and you look at something and you're like, wait, how do I do this again? You know, and
yeah,
you have to like
yeah.
get into that like mind shift, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, so it's nice that people have access to the videos whenever they want.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm so excited to
I'm
learn.
excited for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please show me like anything that you make. I just, whenever people like email me or like tag me on Instagram, like with the stuff they're making, I'm just like, yay! It just makes me so happy. I'm excited to see what you make. That's really
Yeah.
cool. It's always nice to like add new skills to like our toolbox and be like, okay,
Yeah.
here's my vision. Now I can, make it the way that fits with like my vision or my time or how I want this to come across or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to be able to create that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm
Hmm.
excited. And I've enjoyed, I mean, I've created a lot of things, not a lot, but quite a few things for clients with FPP now because I tried it once and I was like, I can do this. I mean, I did
Hmm.
a baby quilt and there was this lightsaber block that somebody had designed and it was supposed to just be a 12 by 12. And I was like, there's no way I'm sewing pieces that are only like an eighth of an inch. Like I
Hmm.
will lose my mind. So I doubled it. And even
Hmm.
still, some of the pieces, I was like, that's a whisper of a piece of fabric.
Yeah,
Like, this is
those are always
crazy.
fun.
But it
And you
turned
only
out
like
really
have
cute.
like two stitches to like hold them into place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, how the needle is bigger than the piece of fabric. Like, are you
Uh-huh.
kidding me right now? Like,
Right.
anyway. But I just had so much fun. And it's like that paint by number kind of like
Hmm.
the controlled nature of it, I think, is what I
Yeah.
really like. It's not
Hmm.
like, yeah, you can choose colors and scraps and the fabric finding part of it is kind of open, but I think
Hmm.
ultimately that like, no, this goes here, like
Yeah.
is a control piece that my brain really likes.
Hmm.
It feels more cozy than like having to completely make up the entire thing or
Yeah.
follow a pattern, but also be kind of like in the wind with it at the same time,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense. So
Oh, then you're gonna like FPP design because there is like such a logical progression to it.
yeah,
It's very satisfying. I love jigsaw puzzles, and I feel like it's the
me
same
too.
thing. It's just like things like start locking into place, and you're just
Mm,
like, yes,
yeah,
like it just feels so good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a puzzle girl too, and my husband
Hmm.
always jokes with me like he's like, "You get weird when you do puzzles." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm like Winston
Same
in
here.
New Girl, like puzzling."
Yeah.
I just things start coming out of my mouth. I start singing. I start saying weird
Yeah.
things, and he's like, "I'm gonna go somewhere else because you're clearly in a zone." I'm like, "Yep, yep, yep. I'm doing it."
Yep. Yeah.
But
This last Saturday, I tried something just for funsies. I entered a speed puzzling competition.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Um,
exciting.
yeah. So it was just like it's an online one. So I did one. Our city put on just like a little town event, speed puzzling competition. My 14-year-old son really likes jigsaw puzzles too. So he's like, Mom, let's sign up. So we signed up. We got third place, and we are like, wow, we are fast at this. And then I just like I really liked it, and so I joined the US like Jigsaw Puzzle Association. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know what, like I said, like new era, right, coming into myself. I'm like, I'm just gonna embrace the things I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the speed puzzling online competition came up, and they're like, you can build your like national ranking and whatever. And I was like, oh, I want a national ranking. And so, yeah, so I did it. So, like, Saturday, I had a table set up and I had like my lights and my, computer screen,
Hmm.
recording because everyone's doing it online at the same time. And they're like, go. And I'm like, ah! And I have my speed puzzling playlist on my headphones. And I'm just like, oh, I was in the zone. It was
Oh my
wonderful.
gosh.
I didn't do great, but now I have a speed puzzling ranking. I don't know what it is. I haven't checked it yet, but I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
going to build my numbers. We're going to see how it goes. So,
That's
but that's my thing.
that's so exciting. I had no idea. I think
Yeah.
actually I saw mm, I think it was like Kristen Bell for some reason. She
Hmm.
was like up
Oh,
against
she
like a
did a Mark
speed.
Rover video.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that it? Because my
Yeah.
kids were watching that. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Uh
just
huh.
saw that. So you say that. I was like, oh, that just clicked because I literally just saw that like a couple days ago. And it
Yeah.
was funny, like he was done and she was like, you cheated. Like, because it
Hmm.
was like nowhere near. I mean, it was like started, but anyway, I'm just like, I don't understand certain things, but then it's like, how people can get so into certain things like the Rubik's Cube. I can't figure that out. But
Hmm.
to like sit
Oh,
and do
no,
a
me
jigsaw
neither.
puzzle, I'm like, heck yes, let's do this. And
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
during lockdown, I always had a puzzle out and
Hmm.
I would just constantly be doing puzzles. And now that things have kind of shifted and like because we went from being locked down and my husband working from
Hmm.
home and my mother-in-law living with us too, she moved out, my husband quit his job, I quit my job, I went to quilting full time, we turned our master
Oh, that's a
suite
lot of
downstairs.
change.
Yeah, I turned my master suite downstairs into an Airbnb, we renovated the downstairs, like,
Uh-huh.
and that was all like in 2020 and 2021. And so now it's like the downstairs is not an open place to do puzzles and there's not really a
Mhm.
space to do it upstairs. And so I'm like, quilting is my puzzling because
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't really have the space to do the puzzling anymore, which is fine. But
Mhm.
so it's just interesting. And yeah, like the
Yeah.
the FPP does feel very puzzly and because you're like, ooh, what scrap am I going to get to use now? And does this fit? And is this piece going to
Mhm.
work? And just
Right.
that
Seeing the
rearrangement.
picture
So
kind of get built. That I
yeah.
would be curious, like the overlap of like jigsaw puzzlers and quilters,
Yeah.
because there is something to like having like a whole, cutting it into pieces and then putting it back together, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that puzzly nature of it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wonder. Like, no, I want to put together a survey because that's
Yeah.
interesting to know. Like how many quilts have you made and how many puzzles have you put together?
Mhm. Yeah.
And how often and when and
Right.
just to know. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because like I have friends who love puzzles. That's like they always
Mhm.
do puzzles. I'm like, you would love quilting. They're like, no. I'm like,
Mhm.
actually, yeah.
Yeah, you would. You need to do one of those interventions that your
Yeah.
friends did.
I know. Like, do I have it in me to like sit somebody down and force them to learn how to quilt? I kind of did that to my sister because when she
Yeah.
was living at home last year, she was just there with us because we were running the business out of my parents' house at the time.
Mhm.
And so she was just always there watching my mom and I work and do stuff. And she's
Mhm.
like, I want to make a quilt. We're like, okay. And of course she chose like she had seen a client quilt that was like all just like little 5-inch squares and they had these like little 4-inch hearts on them
Mhm.
that she had machine appliqued down and we long armed it for her. And my sister was like, I want to make that quilt. And we're like, ma'am, you've never sewn. Like, are you sure?
Right.
She's like, absolutely, I want that quilt. So she like went through all our scrap bin and pulled all the scraps. She like cut a heart template. She cut out all the hearts.
Mhm.
She, put the steam seam on them. She like got a mix match of different like tone on tone white squares and
Mhm.
she like did all the work and we showed her how to do a blanket stitch on the machine and she just like worked little by little and got it done and she made it and then she
Uh-huh.
was like, I want to make another quilt. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, oh, I have this layer cake that I've had sitting around for years. I just got it because it was like $10 one time on the because like the fat quarter shop they used to
Mhm.
do like the daily deal or whatever
Right. Yeah, the little flash sales.
or like the flash sale, yeah. And I got it on one of those flash sales and it's her colors. It's like the like kind of like rusty, orangey, and like deep teal and like
Mhm.
birds and like little eggs. She was like, can I use that? I'm like, yeah. So I taught her how to do the X's and O's pattern. And
Uh-huh.
like you gotta snowball all the corners and you do all this. And I happened to have all the fabric she needed and
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, here's how you're gonna do this, and here's this. And I like showed her all the things, and she's made 2 quilts, and now she's like planning out
Nice.
another quilt. She moved to California to live with her boyfriend, and
Mhm.
um she's working in a school, and so the teacher that she works with, she's like, I'm gonna make her a quilt. So she's like, okay, I'm at the fabric store. Like, what do I get? How much of this do I get? I'm gonna make her the same pattern I made. Da, da, da. I'm just like,
Mhm.
I turned her into a quilter.
Yeah, look what you've done.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm like, I did it with her, but she also was like just there. So I was like, sit down and sew
Mhm.
this. And she's like, okay.
Yeah. Nice. Well done.
Yeah.
Brought
So
another one into the ranks.
like I need more of the family in this. It can't just be me and
Mhm.
my mom. So
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah. But anyway, well, like besides obviously QuiltCon coming up and your
Mhm.
FPP course, are there any other projects or things in the works that you've got going on that we should be looking out for?
No, there's just like the list of quilts in my head that I want to get done, really. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think between now and QuiltCon, it's just going to be. I've got like a few guild teaching things. I just got back from the Great Wisconsin Quilt Show, and so I think between now and QuiltCon, it's only quilting for me. It's a
Okay.
bunch of projects that have been up on my design wall forever. So
Nice.
yeah, that's
Are
what
you
I'm going to be doing.
nice? Are you entering anything into QuiltCon?
Yeah, yeah, I always enter some quilts in. So some of the ones that I want to finish, I'll enter those. I've got a few that I finished earlier this year. So
Mm,
yeah, we'll throw it in and see what sticks.
nice.
So yeah,
Exciting. Okay,
yeah.
well, cool. I'll have to watch their progress on that. And yeah,
Hmm.
I'm excited to meet you in person in Phoenix. That'll be fun.
Yes. Yeah.
And
So grab me when you see me at QuiltCon for
yeah,
sure.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you so much for being here today and chatting with me. And
Yeah,
I've
it's nice to
had,
talk to you.
yeah, it's been fun to chat about all the things. And,
Hmm.
we can quilt all the things and we can talk about all the things and
Yeah,
experience all the things. So,
all the things.
yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And
Hmm.
we'll meet soon and we'll keep in touch.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks.